Hi everyone, it's Dr. Amy here, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different for our marketing lesson, and that is I am going to bake banana bread. Now, there's two things that you're going to come away with in this video. One is going to be a bunch of different brand mentions and just how many brands we use and are exposed to on a daily basis. And the second thing is you might have a pretty decent recipe for banana bread. So this is something that I use all of the time. And what I would like you to do is take out a piece of paper and as you're viewing this, maybe write down the recipe and also think of all of the different brands that I mentioned during this little presentation of baking banana bread and write down all the different brands that I mentioned and then tally them up. So if you are in a class with me, I want you to turn that in and you'll be able to turn that in Canvas. If you are just watching this for the fun of it or for something to do and learn a little bit more about marketing, you can just tally it up, write it down, that's fine. So I teach marketing at NTC in Wausau, and I have to say, by no means am I a culinary expert. I leave that to our wonderful culinary program and instructors. And I also want to say that I am not endorsing any particular brand. These are just brands that I happen to have here at home. So I am not being paid for endorsing any of these brands at all. So this is just a simple marketing lesson, something a little bit fun and different to do that I'd like to start off with. So think about all these different brands that you hear I will mention throughout this baking. So the first thing that I want you to know is I'm going to use my trusty Betty Crocker cookbook. This is a cookbook that I have had for over 20 years, and it is loved and worn very well. And I have to say, this is where I get my banana bread recipe from. And each time I've ever made this banana bread, it's turned out really well. So why go with something different when you can trust what works? So the first thing in the recipe is to take a stick of butter and take 1/3 cup of butter. And this one stick of butter is equal to a half a cup. Now I like to point out something really cool about stick butter, real butter of course, is the packaging. You can see all of these little measurements here. And one of the things that I think the dairy industry and the butter industry has done really well is they count this out by tablespoons. So it's really foolproof for you to measure out your butter. So you just cut the amount off that you need, or one stick is equal to a half a cup. Well, I need 1/3 of a cup for this recipe and have it be softened. So what I've done is just cut about, 6.5 tablespoons or so of butter. Again, I'm not a cooking or baking expert, so I know in baking that you can fudge things slightly, but probably not too much because all the chemistry of it works together. So you want to be pretty exact when it comes to your butter measurement. So I will put the butter into my KitchenAid mixer, and I have my trusty Pyrex spatula. The second ingredient, and I am scooping that out with my KitchenAid 1 cup measurement of sugar. So just 1 cup of white sugar that I'm pouring into my mixing bowl. And the next thing I'm going to do then is to start mixing the butter and the sugar together until it is blended. So it takes about 30 seconds to do that. And I just wanted to let you know that, you know what, baking banana bread for me is something that's really easy to do. And I would think that there's really no exact science to what you can put into your banana bread. This particular banana bread recipe from Betty Crocker calls for the addition of walnuts. And I've made it many different ways where I've actually have taken my Hershey's cocoa and I've put in maybe 1/4 cup of this to make it a chocolate banana bread. So that's kind of fun too. The other thing that I do add in for sure are walnuts. And this just happens to be just a store brand, so might be considered like a generic brand. And this is the Great Value walnuts. So this comes from Walmart with these walnuts. And one of the other things that I don't know, I always add into my banana bread are Nestle's Toll House chocolate chips. These just happen to be the milk chocolate ones that I have on hand. You can add in semi-sweet or whatever, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So I have mixed up my sugar and my butter, and it's looking pretty good here. And now it's ready for 2 eggs. So I happen to have a carton of Eggland's Best eggs in my refrigerator right now. So those are the eggs that I used. And one of the things that I do when I bake is I always crack my eggs prior to putting them right into the recipe, just in case I get any shells into the bowl, then it won't ruin what I'm baking. So that way I know I have 2 eggs cracked that are nice and clean here. And I'm just going to pour that into my mixing bowl. And now I plan to give this a little mix here as well and just blend that together. So far we have a third cup of butter and we have a cup of sugar, white sugar, and we have 2 eggs that I cracked and put in here. And we're just blending this up again in my KitchenAid mixer. You know, one of the things this recipe does not call for is brown sugar. However, I have to tell you, I am a huge fan of C&H brown sugar for a couple of reasons. One, it comes from Hawaii and originally, and I think you all know that I love going to Hawaii and I love everything Hawaii. So the other thing that I like about C&H sugar, it's nice and soft. The brown sugar is great, but it has this great packaging feature, which is you just tear it to open and it reseals across automatically. So your brown sugar does not get dried out and it does not get hardened or anything like that. And it stores nice and easily without dumping into your cupboard or wherever you store your brown sugar. So it looks like this is well blended. So that is good. So the next step in this recipe is to add the bananas. Now, you can use, of course, any kind of bananas that you have on hand that are starting to get ripe. The recipe calls for 3 to 4 mashed up medium-sized bananas. So I happen to have bananas that were a little bit on the bigger side. So I just used 3 bananas and I already mashed them up into a bowl. And I just took a fork and peeled them and mashed them into the bowl. And I'm adding those mashed bananas right into my mixing bowl of recipe now. Now, I want to tell you a little funny story about bananas. So to my knowledge, I am aware of 2 brands of bananas. I'm aware of the Dole brand of bananas, and I'm aware of what I happen to have here on hand are the Chiquita bananas. So Chiquita bananas and any kind of bananas, they put a label on each banana because it actually has a UPC code on it so that they can be scanned at the grocery store as far as how many bananas they're going through and what your cost of bananas are if they don't do it by pound or by item. So that is helpful in retail, is to put a UPC code on to everything that they sell in the store. And some of you may remember this if you are old enough to remember, but there used to be this advertisement. When I was a kid, this was probably like late 70s, early 80s, but there was a really funny song and advertisement for Chiquita Banana. It was actually a song that came out in the 1940s. I encourage you to YouTube it so that you can see it. But here's a little demonstration of what Chiquita Banana commercial is like. Okay, so go ahead and feel free to YouTube this. I just pulled up my iPhone here and thought that I would show you that video real quick of Chiquita Banana. what other great way to brand than to talk about a Chiquita banana and have a song about it? So that's pretty cool in my opinion. Now, I got to look at my recipe again so we make sure we don't miss anything. So far, we have 1 cup of sugar, a third cup of butter softened, 2 eggs. I have my mashed bananas in there. The next thing that I'm going to put in using my Pyrex measuring cup is 1/3 cup of water, just plain old water. It doesn't have to be bottled fancy water by Aquafina or Dasani or Fiji water or any other kind of water that you might buy. This is just regular tap water that I measured out a third cup of right into my measuring cup there. So the next thing that I'm going to do is just give this a little bit of a mix with my KitchenAid mixer again, just stirring all of these things together so that we have everything blended together really well before I add in the dry ingredients. So there we go. That's looking really great. The other thing that I did right before we started is I have my oven, it's preheating. So my GE oven is set to 350 degrees so that when I'm done mixing everything up, I'll be able to put everything into the oven and it'll be ready to bake. So what this recipe calls for, and I already have it pre-measured into my Pyrex mixing bowl, is 1 2/3 cup of all-purpose flour. So you can just buy any kind of flour that you want, any kind of white flour that you can find. I happen to be able to find Pillsbury's Best White Flour, and that's what I'm using here today. And so that is in this bowl is 1 2/3 cup of white flour and then 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So I just got the handy dandy Arm & Hammer baking soda, 1 teaspoon of that, and I added it to my bowl here. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And this is actually just the Kroger brand of salt, so nothing special or spectacular there. I know Morton's is another brand of salt as well that you could use. And then as far as baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. And what I did is I mixed that all in here. I did not sift this. I usually don't sift this unless the recipe specifically calls for that. So again, not a culinary expert, not sure what you should do with that, but it is all mixed together in here and it's ready to dump into my bowl. And I can start mixing these items together and blend this to get my banana bread batter. Okay, I like to start the mixer off slow because when you put the dry ingredients in and you put, flour in, you don't want it to go all over the place. So I don't think IT would appreciate if I had banana batter and flour all over my laptop. So I'm being really careful here. So I have a really good mix going on here of my banana bread. And as I mentioned, the oven should be heated to 350 degrees. And one of the things that I like to do with my banana bread is you can either put it in one big loaf pan or you can put it into these smaller loaf pans. So this recipe is perfect to fit 3 amounts into equally into 3 different loaf pans. So when I'm done with this, I will be baking 3 different loaves of bread. And this freezes really well. Usually keep one out and freeze the other 2. And it bakes up in about 35 to 40 minutes when you put it into these smaller loaf pans. When you put it into a larger, like 9-inch or 8.5-inch loaf pan, when it's just in one loaf pan, it takes closer to anywhere from 50 to 60 minutes, depending on your oven. So that is the one thing that I would say about cooking time with those. The other thing that I like to do too is I take each one of these loaf pans once they're filled and I put them onto an air baked cookie sheet and then I put them in the oven that way. So then these are not individually set on the oven in case I spill or they bake over. Then that way I don't have to clean my oven. So that's kind of a good thing. So then as I mentioned, this recipe, you could make it your own. You can add to it or whatever. This calls for a half a cup of chopped nuts, optional. You don't have to put nuts in if you don't like them or have allergies or don't want to do that or don't even have them on hand. So you can go ahead and do that or not do it. I am going to do that. And I already chopped up some nuts here and I have a half a cup that I'm adding into the mixture. And that is all good to go there. And the other thing that I mentioned before is that I like to add in my Nestle's Toll House chocolate chips. So I like to use my handy dandy Fiskars kitchen scissors to cut this open. And I just kind of pour in probably about a half a cup or so. You can never go wrong with chocolate, right? So I pour that in, give this just a really gentle stir in using my KitchenAid mixer just until all of the nuts and the chocolate chips are blended. So then I have my batter. So I'm just about ready to scoop this into equal portions into each one of my bread pans. But first, very important step. I use nonstick pan spray and spray it into each pan so that I don't have sticky bread. So that would be really sad if your bread's stuck in here. So that is the next step that I will do, is to spray each one of those 3 pans with the Pam spray. And then it'll be ready to go into the oven. Again, the 3 bake at 350 degrees for about anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes, depending on your oven. While that's baking, one thing that I like to do, of course, is to clean up. So I will use my Dawn dish detergent and clean up while I am waiting for it to bake and to be done. So I hope you enjoyed this brand banana bread baking demonstration. And I hope that you have kept track of all of the different brands that I have mentioned here today. Again, have fun with it. And if you didn't catch all the recipe and you're interested in knowing what the recipe is, feel free to contact me and I'm happy to message you or email you the actual recipe written out. Thank you all and hope you're having a great day.